Welcome back to Boring Guy DIY. Today, we're going to be walking you through the steps of changing your oil in your gasoline-powered vehicles. Could be your truck, your car, or your lawnmower. The principles will apply to all. In front of me here is your basic assortment of tools and supplies that you'll need to accomplish the task. There are three types of oil to consider. There is conventional, semi-synthetic blend, and synthetic oil. Choose based on your own preferences. Typically, I would stick with a full synthetic as that is the highest quality and longest lasting oil in all applications. Conventional can be good for short oil change intervals or older cars that we don't want to spend quite as much money on. Keep in mind that full synthetic will get you the longest life and highest performance, while conventional will still work great. It depends on your application and manufacturer's recommendations. Choose the weight that is specified by your manufacturer. You can also check the oil cap on many vehicles. That will specify the weight that is called for in your specific model. Here are some other tools and supplies you will need to accomplish your oil change. First, you will need a socket and ratchet or wrench that fits the size of your oil drain plug diameter. Secondly, I highly recommend using a torque wrench to reapply your oil drain plug. That allows precise torque on that drain plug to avoid under or over tightening of that bolt. Secondly, you will need an oil filter that fits your specific make and model of vehicle. Do not forget the oil drain plug crush washer. This allows a good seal and no leaking. I highly recommend using a cup-style oil wrench that fits your specific filter. When used in conjunction with a ratchet, it makes the easiest oil filter removal. There are also oil filter removal pliers. These can be a little finicky to use, but can work in certain situations. You will also need a pair of gloves. This will keep your hands free of oil, and more importantly, your tools clean and not slippery. An oil funnel for adding oil back to the engine once your oil change is complete. An oil pan to collect all the waste oil that will drain out of the car. I do highly recommend this type or something similar. It makes cleanup and removal of the waste oil easy as can be. And then, as a bonus item, I always check my windshield washer fluid at each oil change. I highly recommend using a good set of ramps to elevate your vehicle to allow for easy entrance to the underside of the vehicle. Safety is paramount. Always use a wheel chock behind the rear wheel to ensure the vehicle will not slip off the ramps. Prior to using ramps, or any jacks for that matter, check each for any damage, cracks, or any previous misuse. Ensure that you're using a safe and fully operational jack or ramp. When positioning the ramps, ensure that they are parallel to each tire. When driving up the ramps, apply even and light pressure on your accelerator. Once the car is fully seated on the ramps, apply the chalk to one of the rear tires. Also ensure that your rear emergency brake is fully engaged. Once the car is secure, open the hood using the hood latch. Now that your hood is unlatched, you typically will have a secondary hood latch in the front of the vehicle. In the center, and it will require some side-to-side movement to open it. Some trial and error may be required, depending on your make and model. Once you open the hood from the latch, you'll want to secure it with your hood rod. Some vehicles will have piston assisted opening, so that step will depend on your make and model. This is the typical configuration for most gasoline engines. You'll have your oil dipstick to check your oil level and your filler. The filler will typically have the oil required for your vehicle. Many modern vehicles have a shield or a skid plate around the oil filter. These can typically be removed very easily with a screwdriver. Simply insert in a plastic clip. There's typically a little recess there. Depress the clip out, and then it will pop right out for you. With the oil pan fully under the oil drain plug, you'll apply your ratchet or your wrench and counterclockwise remove the bolt. Typically, it will require just one half a turn, and then I usually just undo them by hand. Be careful that oil may be hot depending on how long your car was on for before you did this. I typically let it drain from anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to make sure we get the most oil out of the engine. Once the oil is drained, you'll reinstall the oil drain plug. I like to typically wipe these off. Most of the time they will contain a magnet that will collect metal particles. To do that, just get a paper towel or rag, wipe off any excess debris. No metal there, which is good for me. You're going to remove the old crush gasket or crush washer. Make sure any debris is removed. Install the new crush washer. And in a counter or in a clockwise motion, reinstall the plug. When reinstalling, I recommend using a torque wrench. In this case, I actually don't have one that works at the moment. Mine actually broke. So I'm going to reinstall using firm pressure, but not too much. We don't want to strip out the oil drain plug. Typically, these drain plugs require a very low amount of torque to seat them properly. So I'll typically get them snug, and then maybe do an eighth of a turn to snug it up. I had a little trouble with the cup style wrench, so I moved to the pliers. In a anti-clockwise or counterclockwise motion, remove the filter. Keep in mind, oil will drip, so be prepared. Typically, I'll get it loose, and then I do the rest by hand. Sometimes these threads can seem like they last forever. One big thing to keep in mind is that oil filters will contain a rubber gasket. You want to make sure that that gasket comes off with the old filter. If not, you can have something happen called double gasketing, which will cause a leak in the future. So just ensure that that O-ring is not stuck to the mating surface. Once that's pulled off, I typically like to just wipe up my mess here. Typically it'll drip down, so I'll clean up the mating surfaces a little bit. Get those as clean as I can. Remove your gloves. You definitely don't want oil on your hands when you're applying the new filter. Grab the new filter here. Again, make sure that that filter is properly seated. This particular filter comes pre-greased on the O-ring. If not, just apply a slight film layer of oil to help get a good seal. Now you simply apply it clockwise. Be very careful not to cross thread. If you feel any resistance, immediately take it off and try again. It should go on like butter. With oil filters, you want to apply hand tight. Do not use an oil wrench, or if you do, only go about a quarter turn past hand tight. In my case, I typically like to get them hand tight, and then I crank them on as hard as I can by hand. Again, that will depend on your wrist strength and your strength levels. If you need to use an oil wrench, I highly recommend using the cup wrench or a rubber band wrench. The issue with these pliers is that they can dent the outer casing of the canister when reapplying. So they're good when taking things off, but not so good with putting things back on. Typically, just give it a little ugga bugga. You gotta make noises. That's part of it. The more noises you make, the stronger you'll be. And typically, I never have a problem. So hand tight keeps it from, being over tightened, and makes it taking off next time much easier. Then finally, I just give everything one more wipe up. I double check that everything is properly fastened. And then I'll reinstall the shield, and we'll be ready to fill with oil. Now that we have drained the oil and replaced the filter, we're going to fill it back up. First, remove the oil filler cap. Make sure to put this somewhere safe. You don't want this falling down into the engine bay. Ask me how I know. Then, we're going to place a clean funnel into the filler. Make sure that you either look up in your owner manual or online to see how much your engine takes. In this case, this engine takes 5.1 quarts with a filter change. I have here a 5-quart jug. So in this case, I'll fill it up with this full amount. I do have a second jug off camera that I will fill up to finish off and top off the level. And here you just want to take it easy and make sure you're not pouring too much in at a time. Now that the oil has been filled, I always like to take a paper towel and carefully remove the funnel. Keeps your engine bay from getting all gummed up and dirty. I'm going to reapply the oil filler cap in a clockwise manner. Make sure that's properly seated. Then I just do a quick test on the dipstick to make sure we're in the ballpark. The oil hasn't quite had time to settle yet, but typically this is good enough to get a ballpark and make sure that you got what you need in there. So always make sure you wipe it clean. You'll notice here on this particular dipstick, and some vary, but in this particular one, we have 2 holes here. So that's the low oil indicator, and that is high. So we want this to be somewhere in between, typically on the higher end over here. Some oil dipsticks will have hash marks, but same principle applies. Make sure you have it more towards the higher end of the indicator. So then we'll reinsert it. Slowly pull out. And as you can see, we need a little bit more. So what I'll do is I'll fill this up with a little bit more oil, and we should be good to go. Another tip as well is recheck this level once you have rolled the car off the ramps. You know, right now the car is elevated, so that might be giving me a false reading on the dipstick. Now, I know from experience that this car takes 5 quarts, so I think I should be good to go. So now that we have the oil cap fully tightened, the dipstick fully depressed back in its cavity, we're going to close the hood, roll the car off the ramps, and call it a day. Now that we're done the oil change, we're going to carefully roll the car off the ramps. This may seem trivial, but always check behind the car to ensure that there's no small children or animals or anything behind there that can cause any issues. Sounds silly to say, but there's been plenty of incidents in the past of that happening. First, I'll remove the chalk, throw it off to the side, check my surroundings, make sure everything is clear. We'll start the car, put it in reverse, and just slowly let off the brake. No need for acceleration here. Just kind of ease your way off. Put your car in park, and you're good to go. Thank you guys for joining us again at Boring Guy DIY. I'll see you next time.